Hey kids, this is a precursor to a series of small videos I'm doing right now, where I try to fix glitches in Pokémon Ruby, and by extension in Sapphire too, since most of the codebase is absolutely the same. It's intended as both a superficial explanation of the legal loophole to avoid copyright claims when sharing ROM hacks, as well as a small tutorial of how to pull it off yourself. As you already know for sure, sharing someone else's copyrighted material is forbidden by law in most cases. One of the least severe consequences you might face is simply getting your links taken down if you shared something on the internet. But of course, sometimes such actions might even have legal repercussions for the offender. This certainly is the case for sharing unaltered versions of content, but also for those which have been changed, ROM hacks for example, because they still use a lot of original parts and intellectual property. Keep in mind that these statements barely scratch the surface of this topic, but I'm not bored enough to elaborate further on this way too complicated matter. To avoid a copyright dilemma, hackers have a very powerful tool at hand: binary patches. Here is a quick rundown of what this means and also what they are used for. Imagine this is the ROM of a game. For simplicity's sake, I represent it as a block of 10 by 10. Every unit of this block stands for some memory. To make it even simpler, we pretend this ROM just consists of 100 bytes. A developer now copies this ROM and introduces their desired changes into the copy. Those changes are represented by the blocks which have turned red now. And finally, it's time for the first step in our digital wizardry. With a binary diff tool, we can compare the content of the original ROM, which is often called the ROM base, and the new altered version. This process creates a new so-called binary patch, and its content is simply the difference between those two files. If all the changes which were made have been your own intellectual property, you shouldn't get any trouble for spreading this file, since it only contains your very own creation. The second step is now reversing this process, which is called binary patching. By taking the content of the ROM base and applying the changes stored in the patch, we can recreate the exact same file which we couldn't share freely because of legal constraints. In essence, this means for the programmer who created the ROM hack that they can share their creations without fear of getting in trouble. The burden of having the ROM base at hand now lies on the shoulders of the person who wants to play the hack. If you're asking yourself now how you can obtain those ROM bases, there are basically two ways to my knowledge. Number one is using hardware to extract the ROM file from a real cartridge, which I've talked about in one of my previous videos. And number two is asking Google for links. After talking a lot about theory, I want to show you one way to do it yourself. Since it's widely spread in the common format, I'm using an application called Upset, which creates binary patches in the UPS format. This tool is able to do both diffing and patching. Either Google for a download or use the version I'm hosting on my GitHub. The link is in the description. First, let's make our own little patch. Just launch the app, change the mode to creation and set both source and target. In this mode, the source is the ROM base and the target is our ROM hack. I want to mention that you have to make sure your files aren't in use. I had problems myself when the emulator was running one of the ROMs in question. This is what the inside of the patch file looks like after diffing with just 1 byte changed. It's a lot of meta information like the offset, and probably a checksum as well. Now to the second part. This time our source is the .ups patch file and our target is the ROM base. Just make sure that the files aren't in use and also that the ROM base is the exact version the hack was based on. The patch won't be applied if even a single byte is off. And with that we can conclude today's computer voodoo lesson. I hope you found it interesting, and if so, stay tuned for the more technical upcoming videos in the glitch fixing series. Episode 2 will be about the bug where the Pokémon clerk in Oldale Town runs into the trees. There will be some small talk about registers and code execution if you fancy such garbage. Goodbye for now.